Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Stories with Richi, and today we have our special guest, Luca.
Oh, special is right. I'm special. It's fine.
Luca, how are you doing today?
Yeah, man, I'm all right. I'm encouraged. I feel good. And I appreciate being here. Like the love that you've shown me in such a short time speaks to your character, and I appreciate that.
Wow. No, thank you so much for being here, and we're more than happy to have you here. And I'm pretty sure Corbin students think the same. And
Yeah, they're cool people, right?
yeah, yep, and they know you. So, Luca, who are you?
Yeah, what's up, man? I'm just me. You know, I'm nobody. I'm somebody to some people. But I'm born and raised in Hawaii. I was adopted by a Hawaiian family. Well, my biological mom and my stepdad who adopted me. I wish I could say my life was paradise, but just the ocean and the land was paradise. But it seems like paradise is full of problems. We don't have to talk about problems. We can talk about Christ, right, and how he brought me to and through the things that I've gone through. But, yeah, at the moment, man, 16-year veteran of the Air Force, born and raised in Hawaii, 15 years of marriage, 5 kids, 4 boys. Basically spent my Thanksgiving, right, when my wife and 3 older kids went and had fun and festivities while I was at home with one of my sons puking everywhere. Like, he puked everywhere. I cleaned everything up, sat him down. He did it again. I was like, oh, okay.
Fatherhood right there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I love you, buddy, but, oh, I smell like stomach acid.
Hawaii, yeah.
Yeah. So my upbringing was slightly unique. Like, a lot of locals in South Kona kind of live like the way I live, but not everybody. For example, hunting and diving and like trapping pigs, catching them live was what we did every week. Okay. And like once a month we would make smoked meat. So we'd have like 8 pigs. Friday night start cutting, and then we'd work from Friday night to Sunday night making smoked pork. So it was a hard work, man. I grew up on a MacNut farm that was above the ocean. So like we had a land division that we grew up off of. Hunting, pigs up north, goats in the lavas. You notice I didn't say fishing because we didn't have a fishing boat, and like just catching a few fish doesn't really feed your family. Mm-hmm. So you gotta like go diving or throw a net to get enough to feed the family, right?
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah, so every week was me diving, and my dad, so he had leukemia, but he didn't really talk about it or tell anybody. So my biological father and my mom got a divorce when I was like 3 or 4, and then my mom. Well, I guess here's an interesting start to my story, right? So my biological mom is from East LA. My grandmother used to be a hit woman. Yeah, man. My grandfather was actually married to someone else, and my grandma had an affair with him and 3 kids with him. My mom, my uncle, and then another uncle that we didn't find out about till later because he was adopted. And back then they had closed adoptions, so he didn't tell anybody. And then my mom even remembers being babysit by him, not knowing who he was until he died. And then his brother came to Hawaii later on because my grandpa's brother's son was in the Ironman triathlon, and he was like, hey, I know the origins of your family isn't the best, but you're still family. My last name is Iloriaga, so that's your family. Mm-hmm. And yeah, my grandma, not only was she a hit woman, she was like a short power lifter. She had a double mastectomy, so scars, super ugly woman, kind of scary. And her day job was a county clerk at the North Hollywood courthouse. Wow. So like as jokes, she would send us rap sheets of all the celebrities who would get pulled over or arrested. Like a bunch of Robert Downey Jr. arrests, because he did drugs back in the day.
Yeah.
But so my mom was in the gang life. Almost died a few times, moved to Hawaii, found out she was allergic to alcohol. Because my biological dad, who's from New York, joined the Army, he avoided the Army draft, joined the Navy, got stationed in Honolulu, got off because he's like, oh, Hawaii's paradise. And then he was homeless for a while. So he kind of became like a beach bum hippie, and then made his way to Big Island, met my mom. They got together. I remember actually during a divorce altercation, my grandmother hired a guy to kill my biological father. Wow. And the guy showed up at my dad's house, put the gun in his chest, looked him in the eye, and he's like, oh, man, I know you. We went to Vietnam together.
Wow.
My dad's like, what are you doing here? It's like, your mother-in-law told me you were abusing and beating her and gave me $30,000 to kill you.
Wow.
So obviously he didn't kill him because they knew each other. So that really happened. Yeah, wow. Yeah, that was crazy. So needless to say, my grandmother's way of thinking is not
yeah, it's way different.
Adjusted to appropriate morality, right? But I guess that's how hit people deal with problems.
Yeah.
And then, so I do have a sister. She's a year younger. She's not saved yet,
Okay.
but she lives in San Diego. She's an
Okay.
attorney. But yeah, so immediately after that, my stepdad became my adopted dad, kind of raised us. And it was a tight knit Hawaiian family, right? A prominent Hawaiian family in South Kona, the Grace family. So the origin of the last name from the male side, right, is from Portugal. It used to be Graca, but they used to handwrite censuses, so it became Grace. And then his mom is pure Hawaiian from the Kaupu family. And I think they were like royalty back in the day, but everybody likes to say that. But I'm pretty sure they were.
Okay. Okay.
So he had 7 brothers and a sister. I had a bunch of first cousins, but because my dad had, or my adopted dad had
Leukemia.
he was sterile, so he couldn't have kids of his own. Actually, the girlfriend he had before my mom, we grew up knowing them. Her husband was a famous musician whose son kind of sounds exactly like him. They ended up getting saved singing in church, so that was cool. But yeah, man, so I was his only son. My sister was his only daughter. And I think because he was so older and he see his nephews and his other brothers having older kids, that raising me meant I had to keep up with him. So I went hunting at 4 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, that's not, like I knew what a 10-hour workday was by the time I was 8. Wow. And I wasn't aware of this until one day I was, 12, 13 years old. It was after a long day diving. So 3-pronged spear, fins, catching fish, putting them on a stringer that we made from a weed whacker string, an antenna that we sharpened, and then floats from Japan that we found on the beach. So I was cleaning fish, because usually I clean the fish afterwards. My cousin, my uncles were there, and my uncle was a grown man. Came up to me and he's like, "Hey, nobody would have went on that dive that you went on with your dad. That's pretty good." So when a grown man shows respect to a young kid, like,
Means a lot.
it means a lot, but I didn't understand, right? I'm like, okay, thank you, uncle. But my dad, I don't think he knew the Lord, or at least fully didn't give his life to the Lord until he was dying in the hospital. Now we talk about that, but it was a hard life, man. It was hard. Like, my cousins would get beat up by their dads, come to my house, beat me up a little bit, because I had light skin in Hawaii. They're like, "Hey, Haole." I'm like, "I'm not Haole, right? I'm Calvin Gracie's boy." Oh, okay. And then my cousins would be the ones who beat me up.
Wow.
Right? It's rough, man. Like, I'm not making up stories. Unfortunately, I got scars on my face and hands from surviving. But I would say, I'm just guessing. It's not a hypothetical. But if I got into 30 fights, I lost 27.
Wow.
Like, I'm a little dude, right?
Wow. That sounds rough.
Man, Hawaiians are crazy. I actually remember this one fight. It's funny. So, Kekoalanes, name drop. Sorry, guy. 5th grade. We were playing something, and then we ended up throwing hands. And I remember in the midst of throwing hands, he backs up, opens his hand, and smacks me across my face. And his fingertips hit my eyes, and I started tearing. And I was like, "Oh, that was a good shot." And then they broke it up.
Wow.
And then fast forward to my senior in high school, which I was a boarder at in Lahainuna, but I'll get back to that. So we had preseason football on Oahu, different island. Oahuans are known for being, bigger schools, so more talent, bigger guys, more Polynesians. And we played this team called Waianae. Waianae is like mostly locals, so Howleys or foreigners don't go there. And number 11 was like the junior all-state quarterback the year prior. He's a senior this year, 6'4", 200-something pounds, big Hawaiian Samoan guy. So it was a scrimmage more than a game. And they said, because it's a scrimmage, don't take out the quarterback. If you sack him, just hold him. So I broke through the line. I'm grabbing this guy. My face is in his belly because he's so big and I'm not. And he looks down. He's like, "Hey, Luca, good shot." And I was like, "How do you know my name?" He's like, "Hey, it's Kekoalanes. Remember? I slapped you in 5th grade."
Wow.
I was like, "Yeah, I remember." And he's like, "Yeah, no worries." And we hugged it out. Anyway.
Wow.
But yeah, so I had to play football because my family played football, and they were all like really good, and I was really not.
Wow.
It's okay. It's okay. It is what it is. Navigating that was rough. I was a 3-sport guy. I actually played baseball.
Did you?
Wasn't that good.
What position do you play?
So they put me at third base because I wasn't afraid to get hit because I'm used to getting hit already. So like I'll take a ball to the chest to make sure it doesn't go past and whip it to first base. And sometimes they get out, sometimes they don't. Wow. I got a bunch of chips in my teeth and scars on my face from that. Because, if the ground's hard but uneven, you don't know where it's going to bounce.
Nope.
right?
No.
And your fingers, it goes right through your fingers.
Yes.
And so
Gotta figure out.
so third base was rough.
Okay.
It was
Wow.
rough. And like Polynesians get big quick. In middle school, they're 6 feet tall, 200 pounds already. You know, high school, they get even bigger. And
Wow.
well, I'm a little guy.
How did that affect you? Growing up in that rough environment. How did that affect your life?
Good question. Good question. Right. So, learning to navigate that kind of thing, it changes your idea of development. Right. Like, if everyone around you is raised in a certain way, then society's kind of the same. You follow this pattern. But I guess in my situation, you get put in survival mode.
Yes.
Right. And then you're on your own without mentorship. So you figure it out. And then by figure it out, it's trial and error to see what works. A lot of error. Right. Now, during the divorce, my biological father gave his life to the Lord. He was a Christian. He was bringing us to church, but he was struggling, right? Because I think when you're young, you have this idea of invincibility, right? I can conquer the world. Nothing will hurt me. I'm amazing. But I feel like the Christian walk, at least for me up until this point, is kind of like the career of a fighter, right? You're strong in the beginning. You're learning skills. You're taking people out. But as you get older, your knowledge gets better. But your body fails you. You're not as strong. You're not as fast. Your endurance goes down. And you get taken out by a young guy, and it's like, are you going to retire? It's kind of like the sin that you haven't addressed or the trauma that you didn't properly deal with. It's going to take you out. So you either deal with it and retire it, or address it, give it to God fully, because He's concerned with His glory, and it's very important to Him, right? Like if you make church and worship about you, you'll die or get leprosy, right? Priest Uzzah not listening, Ananias and Sapphira making it about them, Holy Spirit took them out, kind of thing. I'm not a credible source on biblical theology. Love the Lord, so you can check me later. Yeah. All right. But yeah, it affects you different, because there were situations like, say, I was getting disciplined by my dad, and I look at my mom for sympathy, and she's like, hit him harder. He's not learning his lesson.
Wow.
So I was like, okay, so what do I do now? And then I think remorse would come in, and they would have conversations. But the first instinct of a Polynesian is to throw hands, right? And I know that it wasn't full strength, because I see my dad take out guys, or Hawaiian dad take out guys, and he would never hit me that hard. But I mean, I would get hit in the face, totally child abuse.
Wow.
Right, but then it's common because everybody else is getting hit, so you think it's normal, even though it's bad, right? Like, so then you shed your fear of physical altercation, so then your confidence there grows, but then your ideology of moving forward, progression. Like, I didn't have a concept of money until my 20s. I actually remember a conversation my dad having about a cousin of mine who joined the military, who made like 40 grand in a few months, and I was like, I don't know what that means. Like, we hunt for everything. I don't see money exchange. I don't know. You didn't teach me anything. It's funny, though. Schools teach us the least about money and food, which are the two things we deal with the most. And I think that's one of Jesus' favorite subjects.
Yes.
Right?
Multiplying the fish.
Exactly.
Right.
Or like diet, nutrition, economics of cash flow.
We can have a whole conversation about the scripture and how Jesus.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I think it's a form of control as far as the prince of this world is concerned. But again, speculating. Yeah. So you ready to get into some of the hard stuff? Can we do that?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Not that other stuff wasn't, but and I don't have to go through all my trials and tribulations, but I can touch on them. But we're here to talk about hope, right? Because I'm still here. I'm still breathing. I still love the Lord. Amen. I do remember one of the preachers or teachers that we had on a Monday or a Friday at chapel. He said, maybe talk to someone who's been through something, but still maintain their faith. I haven't. My life was good, so don't ask me, ask somebody else. So I appreciate his humility there, but, I may be one of those clowns who've been through some stuff. So in 1997, I came home. I won't make it too graphic, right? But I'll just be honest. I came home to find my mom in the midst of a suicide attempt. So I didn't know what to, I was 12 in 97, right? So I didn't know what to do. I called my dad. He came home from work. And so here's where I recognize things now, but I didn't in the moment. I went outside on our lanai, our deck, and there was a empty aquarium. And in my mind, I told myself my mom was moving that, and she cut herself with the broken glass. But it wasn't broken. But I didn't know how to deal with it. Yeah. Right? Like I've heard I forgot his name, so I won't make too much of a reference. But he said ADHD isn't a disease in itself. It's when kids internalize stress and check out because they don't know how to deal with it. And then it's called ADHD later because it's now a trauma response or a coping mechanism that no longer works. Now we can take that somewhere else. Again, not the authority, just things I've heard. But yeah, I remember sitting there and, my dad took care of her or took her to the hospital. She survived that one. But I'm like, man, this is, what's going on? I don't know what's going on. I don't know how to deal with it. I don't know how to talk about it. And that's the problem, right? If you put a Band-Aid on a wound, you can't see it, but it'll get infected.
Yeah, it's still there.
It's still there. It'll kill you dead and eventually, right? It's the slow burn. So to ask me if I thought about suicide, you have to be more specific, right? So why did that happen? Well, unbeknownst to me, my mother's brother that she did grow up with, he ended up taking his life. And he was in and out of rehab, hooked on crack. Actually OD'd himself on crack. They found his body after it decomposed a week later because my grandmother stopped looking, like, oh, he didn't answer his phone, so you don't have to check on him. And then my mom was the one who had to fly over there, deal with that. She didn't know how to deal with it. She comes home, enemy attacks her. She does what she does. So I was aware of that since I was 12 years old because I was exposed to that. And I didn't deal with it. I didn't know how to talk to people. I wasn't aware of mentorship or trauma response or any of that. I didn't know what to do. I honestly didn't. I was 12, know. And then I was sent to a boarding school after that at La Lula, which not like we had money and I tested into it and paid for tuition. It was one of only 2 schools in the nation, which started in 1836, or 1831, but the boarding department, 1836, where you work for your tuition instead of pay. It was the Agricultural Learning Center. So like some ag schools have a few acres or whatever. We had 126 acres. I drove tractor and planted stuff. But we had so it started off as a boarding department, missionary training school. Ended up being a public high school with maintained a boarding department. And again, so many things with that you would think would be good, structure, Christian school, boarding department, but it ended up being like, I don't want to say prison, but like there was very little supervision with kids who are not good people, right?
Wow.
There's a big difference between an 18-year-old Polynesian kid and a 14-year-old white guy like me.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was abused while I was there. I was robbed. I was picked on. I was taken advantage of. Like, it was hard, man. It was a hard time. And after, like, my first few months there, I wanted to quit and go home. And my dad, who didn't tell us he had cancer and was dying, thought that's how he could prepare me for life. If I can deal with this, I can deal with anything. I'm like, but I'm not being honest about what I'm dealing with. Like, when I say I was abused, like, all kinds of abuse, held down and messed with, beat up, robbed. And this was, like, teenagers doing it to me. So like I go from this, I think, nice kid to like I have to defend myself. I'm a cat in the corner all the time. And yeah, there were good kids, but I didn't know how to relate to them because I'm dealing with all this stuff.
Sounds like a lot.
Man, it was a lot. It was a lot. And I think that was the first time that I was exposed to evangelism. One of my classmates had a dream. Yeah, so his dream was like biblical. So the counselor brought in an evangelist who we had a meeting. He preached to us, told us about the gospel, prayed for us. And then I don't know, nothing happened. I didn't understand what I was doing. I didn't really fully give my life over to the Lord, but I was familiar with it. I remember I told you when my parents divorced, my dad would go to church. He would get visitation rights once a week, so he'd take us to church. But again, knowing where the president lives isn't the same thing as knowing the president, right? Knowing about Jesus isn't the same as having a relationship. I think that's why the story of the blind man is so beautiful. He's like, I don't know about this stuff. Maybe you should be his disciple. All I do know is I was blind. And now I see.
Wow.
Right? And Jesus okay, I heard this too. I always wondered, why did he spit in the ground, in the mud, and rub spit mud on his face? And one of my friends was like, well, this guy was born blind, right? They said that. So he didn't have visual senses. He had auditory senses, touch senses. So Jesus making something that he could feel and then telling him to go do something in action was more an intimate moment of speaking his language. So he gave him something he could understand to do, and when he did it, then the miracle happened after the obedience happened, right? Like, could he see when the mud was on his face?
No. Well, I don't know.
Right? But he had to wash it off.
Yeah, had to go there.
So I thought that was beautiful. But yeah, kind of moving forward, I joined the military at 18 because I was like, oh, my sister's all smart getting scholarships. I'm not. The school stuff is hard, or at least you got to be willing to work. So I got saved 6 months after I was in the military. Kind of went like this. We had this reservist chaplain come to my shop, and he asked me, "Do you believe in the Lord?" And I was like, "Yeah, I believe." And this is what I said. I remember it because I was a fool, but this is what I thought. Being in heaven is like being at a sports event, right? If you really believe and you're faithful, you're in the box seats. But if you believe, that's enough, and you'll be up top. And he quoted what, "For even demons believe in trouble, yet revering God more than you. You can't be lukewarm in and out." And I remember like shaking and sweating on the inside. So it's kind of like the flesh fighting as he was talking to me. But I didn't walk away. I felt that inner battle. And then he was like, "You're coming to church on Sunday, right?" I'm like, "I guess I am. Yeah, let's do this." So his name was Pastor Rob Miskowski. If you're hearing this, I'll miss you. But I remember on Sunday, they did the message. I don't even know what he said. But at the end, they did the altar call, and he knew I was there. So he gave a very specific gospel message. And I did the whole thing where I sat in my pew and told myself, I'm not going up there in front of all these clowns. I don't know these people. And I immediately started to shake and sweat. So I'm like, okay, fine, I'll go. I go up there. I gave my life to the Lord. I did it. I'm done. I'm committed. And then he's like, now go tell 3 people. I'm like, what are all these instructions, man? I'm going to tell you. But then I didn't realize you just get saved. Man, people are excited. All of heaven rejoices, right? Amen. So I did tell 3 people. Got invited to Bible study that weekend. Made a few friends. And I don't know, I just kind of put my hands to the plow and didn't look back. See, but what I didn't know was God was really going to pour into my life because what was about to happen would have taken my life, right? We can talk about that. We talk about that. Yeah. So I think that was June of 2003, right? So December of 2004, like December 3rd-ish, I get a phone call from my biological dad, or my adopted father. So at this point, when I left for the military, I would call home. My mom would be like, "Hi," and then pass the phone off to my dad. So like we would talk a lot about stuff. I'm a man now, or a young man, right? I'm in the military. He's a veteran. He was in Vietnam, in the Army. My biological dad was in the Navy. Hawaiian dad was in the Army. So we would talk. So our relationship, I thought, was close at that point. And he goes, "Hey, I got kidney stones. I'm in the hospital. But I had this weird dream." I'm like, "Okay, what's your dream about?" He's like, "I don't know. I think it was Jesus showing me I'm going to have a new body. Like, I'm going to be okay." And so I don't know how to feel about that. I don't know what to think. And I was like, is he quoting scripture about the resurrection, or is he getting a message he's going to be healed? Like, it's just kidney stones, right? And then a week into that, he keeps telling me about these dreams he's having, that he's talking to the Lord, and he has messages for me, and he wants me to write this stuff down. I still have it. We would have hours-long conversations about stuff that he's hearing, seeing, or thinking, and I'm writing it down. And then I get a phone call while I'm at work from the Red Cross saying that he's terminal and that I need to go home. It's like, terminal from kidney stones? So then they're like, "Okay, when do you want to leave?" I'm like, "Oh, it's serious." They're like, "Yeah, we can get you a flight on Friday or Saturday. And then if you want Saturday, it's covered. If you want Friday, you have to pay this much." I'm like, "I don't have any money, so I'll go Saturday."
Yeah.
Mistake. Because Saturday morning, I get a phone call from not my mom, but my uncle saying that my dad died.
Wow.
Just like that.
Wow.
So immediately I was grief-stricken, right? I was blindsided. So I get home, and my mom's, man, she's out of it. Like, she's struggling. She's not doing well. So what I didn't know was he was the link, the biggest link that I had to the family, right? Because he sent me away, though. I didn't grow up around them a lot, but they did fellowship with me like weekly or daily, and we did what we call holo holo, or like hunting, gathering. That's the Hawaiian word, right? So I had a lot of experience with these guys, but blood doesn't make you related, right? Or blood doesn't make you family. Blood makes you related, right? Love, consistency over time, and caring, that makes you family, right? So like God gives you a new family, a practical family, a church family. And then people decide whether or not you're family to them by how they love you or how they don't. So one of my uncles, while my dad was like still in the hospital, goes to our house back on the big island. So the hospital we were at was on a different island. And I think he took some stuff. And then the next day, or whenever we were at the funeral, when I was at another uncle's house who was a Christian, and his kids were Christians, and they were comforting me, and my mom and sister were at home, he takes his 3 sons and goes back to her house and like intimidates her to take whatever he wants. I think there was like some land paperwork or whatever. And then she called me up while he was there to tell me not to do anything. And I didn't know what else to do, but like I collapsed in my other cousin's arms, kind of crying. I'm like, he did what? This is crazy. So I'm a new Christian. I'm dealing with all of this stuff. And I think in the midst of this, I was tempted to focus on the pain and the anguish and all of this, and not realizing that not only did God know this was going to happen, he prepared me for it. He wanted to give me a new mind, a new way of thinking, a new spirit. Because not only is there hope, but he's there, right? The rain falls on the just and the unjust alike. Asking why bad things happen to good people is like asking why water's wet and the sky is blue. Like, it happens to everybody all the time. Wrong question. Right? That comes from a misunderstanding, I think. Again, just me thinking out loud. In the midst of this, in my mom's grief, there was a moment where, I mean, we're getting specific with details, but this happened, and it was kind of big. So she was like, hey, ask your grandma for your inheritance so we can pay for the funeral. I was like, you crazy, I'm not doing that. And she goes, you're not my son. It's like, okay. I don't know what's going on, but this is weird. I'm young. I don't know how to deal with this. I'm out.
Wow.
So then I ended up going to like this pastor's house. We talked about stuff. I told him what was going on. And it was one of those, I don't know how early it is in the morning, but you're going to wake up and come talk to me. Because shepherd, sheep, I don't know. And he was gracious, and he did. And I remember going back home, and my mom was just like taking all her stress out on me for some reason. Maybe because I was there or whatever. And so this is where I think the enemy wanted to get his foot in the door with me. And we had a gun case. There was guns. I was depressed. I was stressed. I was grieving. And this was the first time that I would say a miracle happened that I was aware of in my life. Because, you know, when you pull the trigger, a gun should go off. Yeah. But no matter how hard I squeezed, the gun would not work. Wow. So I got frustrated, threw it on the ground, ran out of my house, and like tried to jump into the highway. And as soon as I got close to the highway, I closed my eyes, and a hand grabbed my wrist and led me back home. I couldn't see who it was. It was dark, but it wasn't anyone I knew. So I don't know if it was an angel, the Lord, whatever, but took me back home, and I passed out on the floor of my house. Wow. The next morning, my mom repented to me and apologized, and I was like, that was something that just happened, right? So no matter how alone we think we are, God has a purpose for us, and even when we're fools, he will step in at the right time. Wow. Does that happen for everybody all the time? I don't know, but it happened for me that day. So there's that. So then, when I was in England, right, I first got saved there. There was like 5 churches within our UK community that the pastors were Americans on base. So being in the military, you have access to email. So these 5 pastors like networked like crazy. So these 5 churches, even though it was 5 different buildings, 5 different names or whatever, we all did stuff together all the time. And like the services were at different times, so single clowns like me who didn't have anything to do could go to different services during the day. I actually remember one time we went to one church, and they went a little long, and our church was at 12:30, and he's like, I see you tiptoeing out of my service. Tell Pastor Valley I said hi, or tell Pastor Carradine I said hi. I'm like, all right, sorry. They knew what we were doing, right? Yeah. So I thought that's how all churches were. All the churches that are next to each other, we're all one body, different buildings. We connect, we network. Oh, you're having a combined service for baptism. We all go. Oh, you're having a retreat. We're all invited, so on and so forth. And I remember so many people would come in and say how refreshing it was to be a part of this. And a year, so my father passed away in December of 2004. And in January of 2005, I got stationed in the States for the first time in South Dakota. So I get there, I'm grief-stricken, it's fresh. I go to the first Bible study, I tell guys, they hug me or whatever, it's cool. But then I began to realize that whole church family that I left in England was quite unique. Not all churches in the States are like that. In fact, immediately coming to the U.S., it was like a tangible oppression of sin that tried to rip us apart, that I didn't feel in a social setting and culture that I was feeling. When it was like being on campus, right? I'm surrounded by my Christians, but then I go back to work and I'm surrounded by not so Christian people. Like they would tell me what they did on Saturday night, and they'd ask me what I did. I'm like, oh, dude, we had Bible study. We talked about 1 John. You want to know what we talked about? I'll tell you. I promise. They're like, oh, okay, this guy. Like,
Wow.
I'm just saying. Anyway, and so in December or in January of '05, I get to this new church, and it's not obvious at first because they show up, right? Like I'm the new guy, new toy. But then there's no other churches that they talk to. The pastors are like kind of shepherds, but kind of not. And it was just different, man. It really was. Being in the States was different. I'm not from the States. I'm not used to living here, and everything was different. Like in the UK, everything's closed at 7. You got to go home and be with people, right? Over here, everything's open all the time. Go do something else. In the UK, I knew all of my neighbors. They all knew me. Over here, I'm surrounded by strangers.
How many neighbors do you know?
Okay, so I lived on a street where it was house, 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 house.
Uh-huh.
And for like a half a mile, we all knew each other. We didn't necessarily were close, but like even now that we're talking, I'm like, yep, I knew all these people.
Wow.
Like I could say hi to them. We could have tea together. And then so my one neighbor, like right next to us, old British couple, this clown would not say hi to me for 2 years. So that was weird. And then finally when he said hi, I'm like, well, what's your problem, old man? He's like, well, first of all, when you first moved in, like my wife's dad passed away, so we weren't in the mood. And second, you Americans don't stay here that long, so what's the point? Well, we stayed there for 6 years. I ended up becoming friends with him and all his sons and where they worked, and then the bosses over there, and then all their coworkers. Like, it was nice, man. So I get to this place in South Dakota, and a year later, so my mom comes to visit us in June of 2005. Or me, anyway. And then she went to see my sister where she was at. But when she came to visit me, like I had a big old church, right? A bunch of people. I had 2 close friends, Ken and Brandon, that I used to hang out with. And we went to Applebee's one time. Okay, so you gotta understand, the Hawaiian culture is based on respect, man. Like, you don't call elders by their first name. Like, you put your head down. You don't speak unless you're spoken to. Even within ourselves, we don't, like, be disrespectful and assume it's funny. Like, being funny is funny. Being disrespectful is just rude. It just is. And then, like, it's kind of like a game of if you want to be that cheeky, you kind of test the waters with who you can test it with, but it's not like a given. In fact, unfortunately, when I first joined the military, I was not saved. And when people talk to me that way, I'd smack them because I didn't know. And then they're acting weird, like, why did you do that? I'm like, you heard what he said? Oh, yeah, but he's joking. I'm like, it didn't sound like a joke. Like, he's talking about my mama.
So being sarcastic.
It just... Yeah, because, Hawaiians are, like, violent and, like, we're all nice and docile until you disrespect us, then we're warriors, and
Wow.
It's hard. It's a weird dynamic, right? So I got in trouble a few times in the military for that. My bad. Like, okay, did you know about tacking on stripes? Like, when you get promoted, they put stripes on your arm and they punch you. They call it tacking on stripes. Well, I didn't know about it. And when I first walked in to my shop with an extra stripe on, this guy who I wasn't particularly friends with hit me super hard on my arm. And I turned out, punched him in the chest. I'm like, I know what your problem is. We can take this outside. And everybody's like, what are you doing? I'm like, you saw he hit me first. And they're like, oh, no, man, he's just tacking on your stripes. I'm like, don't do that.
Wow.
So as a joke, when we did the ceremony, they got the 2 smallest girls to come in and, like, hit me as light as possible. So anyway, yeah, so that was funny. But, yeah, so we're at Applebee's. And the reason I said this was because the way that I was interacting with people from America was appropriate for them, but not appropriate for interacting with elders and people in Hawaii. So because there's a big group of people at Applebee's, they took a little bit longer to get to us. So when the waitress finally showed up, everybody was, like, hungry and looked at her. And when everybody looked at her, and there was like 30 people at the table, my mom backhanded me in the mouth. She said, how dare you forget your place and be so disrespectful to these people? And I was like, oh, Mom, that's how they are. Like,
Wow.
And the only person that saw that was the waitress.
Well, that was helpful.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah,
Just one
so I'm 20 years old getting smacked in the mouth by my mom for not being inappropriate in America. And the waitress is like, oh, my goodness, what just happened? And I'm like, it's fine. It's okay. Just give me a smoothie,
Cool it down.
Yeah. I'm like, all right, Mom, you good? But then, like, at night, we'd fall asleep on the couch next to each other, right? I bring this up to say that she met all these people, right? Like, they got to know her for the week she was there. And so my dad passed away December 17th, 2004, like right around Christmas. And my mom, last Monday was her Memorial Day, the day she took her life. So I got a phone call from my biological dad. Don't be mad, Dad, if you hear this, but it's what happened, so you're going to have to deal with it. He calls me up crying. He's like, do you know what happened? I'm like, no. He straight up said, I can't tell you, and called somebody else and hung up on me. I'm not going to mention what I think about that. I'll leave it at that because he will listen to this podcast. Love you, Dad, but that's what happened. So my grandmother, right, the hit woman, calls me up and goes, your mom's dead. Wow. She took her life. You ever get into a fight or a baseball hits you in the chest and like it takes the wind out of you and you can't react for a second, you can't say anything? It was like this is not happening to me. This happens to other people. This happens on TV. This doesn't happen to me. Like, come on, Lord, what did you save me for? What is this? I didn't understand, right? Like, I didn't realize salvation can sometimes anecdotally be like a parachute. Just because if you're in the airplane and somebody spills coffee on you, you don't take off your parachute. Probably hold it tighter, right? But I was mad at the parachute. Not that you're a parachute, Lord. Forgive me. It's a weird anecdote. But, yeah, man.
Sounds like tough.
Oh, it was all the things. It was tough. It was confusing. It was heartbreaking. It was unexpected. Although, I don't know. We don't need to get into details or specifics about how it happened, but it happened. I will say this. Nobody cleans up the mess, right? So me and my sister had to go clean up the mess. So, yeah, I don't have combat experience, but the things that I've seen, I'm not saying are worse, but I'll deny. I mean, I'd be lying if I said they didn't affect me. And it wasn't like the remains and the mess left by a stranger. It was my mom. I'm single, man. I'm not married. I don't have anyone in my life. That I just lost the two people that love me the most in this world, and I'm alone.
Lonely.
Right? So we go back and deal with that, and man, my sister, I got to give her credit. She orchestrated a lot of things on the business side of things. Like, you know how sad it is when we go to the funeral home and they all know who you are, or the mortuary? They're like, oh, you guys are back? I'm like, yeah. They all know us. They knew us by name.
Wow.
And like, oh, they already had our numbers and everything because we were just there, you know? And
too lost.
yeah, so I will say this. One mistake that I made in that whole process, right? So my mom was grieving. She was depressed, and she's not in a good state of mind when she did what she did. So the notes that she left were out of that. Like Rachel, when she gave birth to Benjamin, right? She said, I will name you Benoni, son of my sorrow. And was it Israel stepped in and said, no, he's Benjamin, the son of my right hand. Do not name him out of your pain and sorrow, right? He needs to be named through righteousness. So my mom was leaving this stuff and saying how nobody from the Grace family helped her. They abandoned her. They left her. They didn't even call her, right? Like, for whatever selfish reasons, like, oh, I didn't call her before, now she's in pain. I don't call her now. Like, what do I do? I get that, but it's sad.
It is sad. Fortunate.
So now she's on her own. My auntie Lucille Kama, I love you. You stepped in for us. I appreciate you. I miss you. You'll be, yeah.
I'd like to know more about your sister. Can you tell me more about her? How was she able to handle the situation?
Yeah, so we talked about that recently because all the time I'm dealing with this by myself. She's dealing with too, but she doesn't have the Lord, right? So basically what the military showed us to do is deal with it, compartmentalize, move on, accomplish the mission. Well, in the midst of all of that, so one of the guys that we went to high school with, that we were boarders with, his name is TJ. We knew him in high school, and he went to Annapolis, joined the Navy, and somehow him and my sister crossed paths, and they were together at that time. And he proposed to my sister. So it gave her a distraction to focus on, right? Her new relationship, her engagement, her wedding, and that happened. I think it was either before or after my mom took her life. I don't remember, but it was after my dad passed away, because he was there, and they were already together. And she was in law school, so she had a distraction that would consume most of her time. Because I imagine going to graduate school is time consuming.
Sir.
Right, and it's more intensive and involved. Just speculating.
No, I can tell.
All right, yeah.
I know the feeling. That's a story I need to tell you, but
like, to be honest, she wouldn't complain as much about her husband deploying because she always had work to do. Like, she would mention it, but she's like, I know it sucks, but man, I have so much time to get work done. I'm like, oh, okay. So we kept in touch. I think she was really good at putting up walls and barriers, and then holding on to that, and then secluding herself. Like, for example, during the divorce, my biological father tried to kidnap me, but not her. So she hated him for that ever since that moment. Walls up, defending herself. I didn't really understand what was going on. Again, I was a kid, like 3 or 4 years old. But I do remember that, like, he drove by, dumped up a few trash bags of her clothes, went home, and then I remember the cops came and picked me up.
Wow.
And then brought me back to my biological mom and adopted dad's house.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think her defense mechanism is
In a wall.
distance. Yeah, walls and distance, right? If you're not close to me, you can't hurt me.
How about you? Because,
Yeah, I'm a different dude.
okay, tell me how we're able to handle that.
So one of the coping mechanisms that I adopted, unfortunately, when my dad passed away, I remember wanting to be more involved with the church, with worship, with my relationship with the Lord, asking all of these questions: why, what, who, when, and seeking mentorship and guidance, which I got a little bit of, but I don't think it was enough or whatever. I got what was available from the men who were available to me, right? And it seems like, oh, check this out. So in Europe, man, if I made a friend, I saw that dude at least once a week, right? And we were friends. Like, you get close in a short amount of time. You see that dude once a week. And in America, it was like it takes a couple of years just for them to invite you over. So it takes forever to get close, right? So in this time, I'm trying to get close. Even Christians, right? It's hard for them to shake their culture, right? Like, I think sometimes with Hawaiians, it's hard on some points and easier on some points. Like, that's definitely pagan. We're not doing that. But man, I grew up doing this, and this is amazing for family, but it's not godly, and then you struggle there. So that's where the struggles are. So for me, I felt like I'm a soft kid on the inside. Like, I'm tender-hearted. Heart out of shell, like an egg, right? Heart out of shell, but like yolk on the inside. Make a good omelet. I don't know, whatever. So in the midst of this, I wanted more fellowship, right? Because I'm alone. I told you, I was single. I didn't have nobody. And this is going to get to a sad part. But when my mom passed away, nobody would call me, and the one guy who did, I love you, Pastor Rich, it was just too much. He would like tell me that I should say I'm blessed and that I have all this stuff, and I didn't know how to take it. It was kind of weird. So I would like, I don't know how to deal with this. Goodbye. But my church family in the UK found out about my mom, bought me a ticket to come back to the UK for a couple weeks, and just loved on me for 2 weeks. Brought me food, told me how much they cared for me, just was there for me. I was like, man, you guys are amazing.
That's a real church.
Like I had to go back to the UK for them. Like, they had a combined service. They introduced me to the new people, told them what was going on, and it was just love, man. I was so blessed by all that. I still am. There was one conversation that I had with the guy. His name is Lance Mitchell. I hope you hear this. I was on my way to somebody's house back in the U.S., and he called me, and I knew there was a time difference. And I was trying to say I don't have time right now because we're about to do this thing. But he's like, oh, you don't have time for me? And he hung up, and I haven't heard from him since. What I was trying to say was, I'm about to step somewhere. I love you. I miss you. I have time for you. I will make time for you. Just in that moment, we lost it. But I think feelings and tensions were high. And I found out he was going through a divorce, so there's that.
Wow.
If I miss you, please get in touch with me. I want to tell you I'm sorry. I love you. Anyway, so there's that. So I get back to the church family in the U.S., and sadly, they treated me like I had a disease they would catch if they got close to me, man. Like, it was rough. Like, nobody really talked to me. And then my friend Ken and Brandon, I was at Brandon's house, and his mom kicked me out of the house because, I don't know, she was uncomfortable that I was there. And do you know how I had no one. The only people I thought I had don't want anything to do with me, right? We went over Psalms 42 earlier. Like, that is how I felt. I felt desolate. My tears are my only food. I was depressed. I feel alone. But how can I deny you, God? Like, you're obviously real. If not, I wouldn't be alive, right? What is going on? Like, are you stripping everything away from me so that you're my only everything? Like, I don't know what's going on. I lost I went to boarding school. I had to deal with all this stuff. I lost a right family union upbringing. And now this, like, the family you give me doesn't even want me. What is going on? I'm so full of anger and hate and desperation and confusion and loss. And it took me a while to realize that if someone hurts you this much, you have to forgive them this much. You can't forgive them this much because this little bit right here will build resentment, and it'll create barriers in your life. So real quick, fast forward, that church family, I felt like I forgave them individually, but as a whole, I had a problem with trusting the church for anything. Even after I got married, church would say, "Oh, do we have any volunteers?" Man, I told you I know what a 10-hour workday was by the time I was 8. I know how to work, all right? And I would be hesitant and apprehensive. And my wife's like, "What's your problem?" I'm like, "I don't know." And it wasn't until like this year, one of my elder mentor counselors at our church was like, "Yo, man, you didn't fully forgive the body of Christ for the way they hurt you. You need to let it go. You need to forgive them. Otherwise, that will always be a barrier." And I did, and it's freeing, and it's been amazing. But yeah, I had to reach down and go, "I forgive you. I forgive you, humans who love the Lord but did not love me. I forgive you."
Wow.
Right? Because that was rough, man. That was rough. But in the midst of all of that, it was like, so Psalms 42, when I read that, I imagine myself like stripped, broken, and bare next to a stream, and I'm crying, and I'm desperate. I'm like, "Lord, I'm alone. I'm hungry. I stink because I haven't showered. Like I haven't fully lived a holy life at this point. Help me, man. Help me." And then it's almost like God takes me to where he split the Red Sea and shows me his power surrounding me, that he will never leave me. He'll never forsake me. He's always there. He cares about me, and I matter, and I'm valued. And if I could see in the spirit, like Elijah told Elisha, show him in the spirit what you see. And then he saw the warriors, right, in this, yeah. So it's almost like that. Like, so there's hope there, right? We don't see in the spiritual because we have natural eyes. We don't understand in the spirit because we have a natural understanding. So we have to bridge that gap, and the Holy Spirit is the one who does it for us. But it's those moments of desperate desolation where he reminds me, I'm not alone, like that cliche footprints in the sand thing, where it was then that I carried you. And I never identified with that so much until I was the one being carried.
Wow.
Right? And yeah, I've had a hard marriage. I made mistakes. What I was going to say earlier is, you talk about coping mechanism and how it's good for me. Man, after my mom died, I would go home. I lived across Hardee's, Carl's Jr.'s, whatever they call it here, fast food burger place. I would go home, I would pray. I would say, "Lord, I'm this, I'm that, I love you, I still love you, but I'm going to go get drunk, and I'm going to eat some junk food until I pass out. I'm sorry." And I did that for 9 months.
9 months.
I got fat. I woke up one morning, my foot was covered in blood, and there was a bike in my garage that didn't belong to me.
Wow.
So, like, apparently I got drunk and stole somebody's bike and rode it home and cut my foot.
Wow.
I did kind of figure out whose bike it was, and I gave it back. So sorry about that. But yeah, I'm saved. I love the Lord, but I'm grieving. I'm getting, like, what is going on? This isn't how a Christian should act, right? But yet, while David was a murdering adulterer, God called him a man after his own heart, the greatest worshiper who ever lived. While Gideon was a coward, and God called him a mighty warrior, right? He said, "Go, O mighty warrior, in the strength that you have, and I will be with you." While Abraham was a fearful liar, God called him a healing prophet. So thank you, God, that you step in and remind us who you say we are, because I am who I am says I am, not who I say I am, not who the people around me who only see me as the sum of my failures see me as I am. I'm who he says I am, right? That's part of that righteous man falls, because you're not viewed in that light. And I feel like this is a common message, right? Talking about gospeling ourselves. And it's an easy trap to get into because we live in the flesh. It attains to the flesh. It feels good to the flesh. So if it does feel good to the flesh, it's probably not of God, right?
So 9 months eating junk food and drinking.
Yeah, man, I got fat.
How many pounds did you gain?
So I went from 160 to 210.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was bad. And
How
then,
were you able to get out from that situation?
So I basically, so what happened was I didn't feel comfortable going back to the church I was going to. And I had not gone to church that time. Like, I would just pray and then, yeah. And I remember that one of the ministers said he had a friend who went to this other church called Dove. And you could see it from the freeway. So, like, I would drive past it and see it, drive past it and see it. And finally, on the memorial of, 9 months, so whatever 9 months was, I remember my sister told me she was getting married, right? So that was the first time I'm moving and I'm doing something and I'm leaving. So I go to my sister's wedding, and then I come back and I'm like, okay, I got out of my bed. I got out of my house. I got out of my head. Maybe I should get out of my funk and go back to church. So I do. I was like in November or something, and I kind of tried to hang out with some of my friends from the old church, but it was still kind of weird. And they kind of moved on from me and whatever. So I went to this new church, and so two things that it taught me. You have to be easy to love, unfortunately. Not everybody's going to love you the way Christ commanded. And two, if I was honest about my struggles, they would treat me like the other people treated me. So I lied. And I didn't straight up, like, when people ask me how I'm doing, I'm good. Yeah, are you got parents? Oh, yeah, they're fine. They're at home. It's all good. It's good. We're good. What are we doing this weekend? You know?
So you put kind of on the wall the same as your sister did.
I did, but in a different way, right? So, like, playing games with my mind, justifying sin or whatever. Because maybe it seems weird for someone to go, man, I'm going through this, I'm dealing with this, I'm dealing with this. People are like, oh, problem child. So on that note, I felt like I was like, I'm good. I'm the local boy from Hawaii who's in the military or whatever, and we can talk about rugby later. So then we just talk about the good points, and everything's got to be good because we're good. We're keeping up this face. You got to be easy to like. And again, that whole arc of a fighter is like the walk with the Lord. Like, you can pretend you're not going to eventually get knocked out, but you're gonna, because you're going to get old, right? I didn't deal with my mom, the trauma caused by my dad and mom, properly. I compartmentalized and got the mission done, right? And I did that for 11 years with a coping mechanism that was not God. It was no longer alcohol. It was called the gym.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah, man. So I told you I was like 210, right? I'm only 5'8", so 210 on me, it don't look good. Like, I'm like, oh, that's belly. So I would go to the gym for like 6 hours a day. I didn't like lift for 6 hours, but like I'd go run, go play basketball, go play racquetball, do circuit training, run some more. And then the gym closed at 10:30, so like I had to go.
Yeah.
Like, so I get off at 4, I'm at the gym by 4:30, 10:30 they close it. So I was like, that's why I know it's 6 hours. And I lived there for like months.
Wow.
And I lost all my weight. And then I got into motocross. And I don't know if you know, but like riding trails is one thing, but competitive motocross, oh man, it is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I remember the first time I went riding with these guys who were track racers, and at lunchtime I couldn't move, and I slept on my trailer until they were done because I couldn't ride anymore.
Wow.
Yeah, and my workout like totally changed. I went from, like everybody does the 3 sets of 10, so I did 2 sets of 25, and then I found out about Tabata circuits. You familiar with that?
No.
All right, so it's about endurance training, so like 20 seconds of whatever, and then 10 seconds of rest. I think 8 reps of that, and then it builds both pink and white muscle tissue, endurance and strength, whatever. I was a speed skating coach, Olympic speed skating, Tabata. It's cool. Now you know. You guys are educated. All right. So lost all my weight, got into motocross, and my relationship with the Lord started getting stronger. I wanted more of Him. I didn't deny Him. Like, I didn't go, God, you're not real. I hate you. I just went, God, this sucks, and I need you. Can you help me out here? Like, can you show me the way that I'm supposed to go? Because I can't hear anything. I'm confused. And so in the midst of that, instead of, like, I did try to go to see a secular psychologist, but I don't know, it didn't work, and I didn't know what I was doing. And because I wasn't honest about my struggles, nobody knew to mentor me in those areas. So I didn't get the help because I didn't speak out. Like, that was the folly, the fallacy that I was believing. Had I spoken out, maybe one of them Christians would have been like, yo, we need to talk about this, because if you don't deal with it, like Joseph, when his dad died, Israel, he grieved right away. You get 70 days, you need to deal with this. I believe grief is a process God gave us. It's not some weird abstract thing that we figure out. No, grief is a part of what we, like, I could be wrong, right? But I think grief is something God gave us to deal with our loss and our pain and draw closer to Him in the midst of what we're dealing with. That's what I think. I don't know. I'm in Bible college. We'll figure it out later, right? Yeah. So I was, when I couldn't handle or whatever, I would do this drug called the gym. Unfortunately, so I did that for 11 years, man.
Wow.
And in those 11 years, I got married. I had kids. I was able to do my job. And within the confines of the military, it's easy to maintain stability, structure, and discipline because they kind of force you, right?
You have to.
Like, man, imagine going to work every day and people checking for strings on sticking out on your and seeing if you shaved. Like, they're that close. Like, did you shave this morning? Yeah, man, I shaved. Or if you didn't, okay, so you're late because you're gonna gotta go shave, and when you come back, it'll be late, and you're in trouble. Like,
Wow.
that's the level of
Expectations.
Oh, dude, yeah, it's nuts. And like, oh, you didn't shine your shoes. I'm like, no, I'm a mechanic. Well, you better shine your shoes.
Wow.
Yeah. So the downside is you can look amazing but be a horrible person, but at least up front you look good.
That's what God wants for us.
Or I don't mean horrible person. I mean like horrible airman or yeah. Sorry, or horrible person. I don't know. Whatever.
Appearance matters a lot.
So yeah, but in the midst of me doing all the things I know I shouldn't, I began to be less shallow and judgy with people when they fall and have more compassion. For example, I remember when I was married in England and we had a couple come over. And after like the first time we barbecued at their house, he was like, hey, I just want to let you guys know that yes, my wife did cheat on me, but yes, I forgave her, but no, I don't trust her. So that's kind of what we're going to deal with, right? And so when you hear that, you're like, I don't know what to think, blah, blah, blah. And then they get kind of shallow and kind of judgy and kind of weird and you look at them different. Well, after realizing the truth that I am no better, now I can look at them and go, thank you for your honesty. I appreciate your vulnerability. I know how to pray for you, right? Bible says, have heart-to-heart relationships where you can confess your sins to one another and pray for one another, uplift one another, outdo one another in good works, considering one another, laughing and grieving with one another. Man, because that's closeness, right? That's selflessness. And I didn't have that at first. Maybe a lot of people don't either. So maybe that's something that I can identify with you young people listening to this podcast who love the Lord but haven't experienced life and maybe see people who aren't as holy as you. Right? It's compassion, right? For it is the kindness of God that brings men's hearts to repentance. You can't force your wife or your spouse to do something by yelling at them. You can't force your kids to do something. You definitely is not going to force a stranger. Like even God doesn't force you, right? He's described as a gentleman. Yeah. And again, there was ups and downs here and there. Like I dealt with depression because I didn't deal with it properly. But that 11 years thing, I felt like I had a handle on life, right? Because I was coping. Well, at that 11-year mark was my 31st birthday-ish, and I got the worst injury I had in my adult life. So, like, at this point, I did the whole rugby thing, right? So I went pro for a little bit. We can talk about that later. And then I lost that, and then I started running marathons, and then I got into jiu-jitsu. And, like, my 4th day ever wearing a gi, I had a seminar with Braulio Estima, who was like one of the top 5 in the world at the time. And he picked me out of the entire crowd of people and was like, man, I like what you're doing. Come up front and show everybody what you just did. And everybody's looking at him, looking at me, looking at him, looking at me like, yo, it's his 4th day. So I was like, what do you want me to do? He's like, do what you just did. Man, you're doing really good. How long you been doing this? I was like, 4 days. He's like, what? You got to keep this up, man. So again, with the whole sports thing, like I said, we can get into another time, but it's an area where I give glory to myself because I can do it, right? So then God doesn't get the glory that he deserves, and he took me away from that. And I understand, it's fine. So in the midst of my jiu-jitsu thing, I was rolling with, so there's the martial arts side and there's the MMA side. Those MMA guys are like nuts. They chew you up and spit you out and see if you can handle it, where the martial arts side is a bit more disciplined, a bit more kind, and, the foundation gets built a little better. Where the other side of it's like, full-blown testosterone. Wow. Like, it's nuts. So I'm rolling with this one guy, and he takes me to what we call T-City, right? Tap City. Like, he's tapping me out every 5 seconds. And then the next day we roll, and it's taking him a little longer. Then the 3rd day we roll, I tap him.
Wow.
And I'm like, man, you did that in 3 days? It took your friend over here 6 months. Sorry, Oscar. So then I roll with the purple belt, and then I tapped him with a knee bar that he didn't expect. I'm like, man, you got to keep this up.
Wow.
And then a day later, so your lat is like 70% of your back. And I tore my lat in 9 places. There's this muscle that holds your shoulder in the back. Tore that.
Wow.
I actually remember I went to the doctor and I lifted my arm up and you could see the hole where the tear was. And this clown put his finger in it. And I reacted and I went like this and I like karate chopped his face. And he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know, I didn't mean to, but you put your finger in there and it hurt so bad. I'm so sorry. And he's like, I'm not going to do that again. I'm like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't have done that.
He learned.
He's like, So to you kinesiology guys, I totally did not have an appreciation for what you do until that moment. And I had to go to physical therapy for 9 months. And everything that I thought and did with my body as far as working out changed. So thank you for what you do. Because until that moment, I didn't appreciate you.
Wow.
And also, I thought the physical therapy was going to be cool and fun and easy. Heck no, I hated this woman. She worked me so hard every day, caused me pain. Like, you ever heard of dry needling?
No.
It's where they take a needle down to the bone to agitate the muscles. And I remember sitting there, and like she would do that to my muscles to cause spasms, and tears would come out of my eyes because it hurt so bad. She's like, "You okay?" I'm like, "No, I kind of want to hit you."
Ay, ay, ay.
She's like, "I'm pregnant, don't do it." I'm like, "I still want to." But so here's the problem, though. I couldn't use my drug of choice, right? I couldn't work out. Well, it was 2014. I could go get high. And for 7 years of my life, I did. I was hiding it. I would do that whole repent, go to church, apologize, pray, get weak, get high, repent, like this was a cycle for 7 years of my life, man.
Wow.
And I loved the Lord. I loved my kids. I was trying to hide it. I was just, my mind wasn't in the right place. I wasn't serving God fully. I was serving myself and this. And I didn't know how to deal with it. It was like a Band-Aid on a wound that was just continuing to get like infected and more. I mean, like, you know, like in shows that it turns black, right? But it was turning black, well, first gray and then black, and it was just killing me. And the jobs that I had, I wasn't that good at because I was high all the time. And like, I know it's maybe hard to hear, like, you love the Lord, but I know. I did. I'm sorry. I feel ashamed for all of it. But maybe when Christ said he died for my shame, we can use this for his glory, right? For you overcome the enemy by what? The blood of the Lamb and the word of your testimony. So it must mean something. And I think 2019 was the first time I tried to get sober. And up until that point, I kind of tried, but I didn't. And then finally, it just got to the place where the consequences were just too bad. Like, I lost my job. I did lose my family for a little bit. I lost my house. I know what sleeping in your car is like. Stinky. So, man, my wife, she's amazing. She gave me another chance. She kept fighting for me. So I think that's a big difference between, because I have dealt with homeless people. They don't have someone in their face constantly putting pressure on them to get better. Or I did, and it still took years, right? So
Tell me more about your wife.
yeah, so this is how we met. That new church that I went to, the one where I didn't tell anybody what was really going on with me. So as a habit on Wednesday, and I don't know if you noticed this, but when you go to Bible study, do you see people with kids go to Bible study? No, because they got kids. Nobody watches their kids. So single people or people without kids go to Bible study. So Wednesdays on this new church, I'd go upstairs with all the old people, and we'd study the Word. Well, I say old people, but like I was 20, right? And then the youth, or so I thought, would go downstairs. And one of the youth ministers was like a couple years older than me, and he'd be like, "Hey, you want to come to coffee afterwards?" I'm like, "Yeah, cool, but I'm trying to hang out with all these young people, you know, because I'm young, I'm immature, I didn't understand. I can't just treat them like family, you know, idiot." Anyway, so I'd hang out with him, and I remember sitting down, talking to him and his friend. She looked a little older, but like, again, in my mind, it's youth, and in my mind, youth is your age ends with teen, right? And there's a group of what I thought were teens talking about credit cards. And I didn't realize I said this out loud, but I was like, oh, what parent gives their kid a credit card to spend on whatever? And then this tall, like, we don't have redheads in Hawaii, okay? So I noticed, right? Like, I'm like, oh, they're real, you know, kind of thing. But it's like kind of auburn, kind of blue, not quite red and green, but close enough, you know? So I'm like, oh, okay. And then she's like, "Were you making fun of me? You're stupid. You're a jerk." I'm like, shut up, weirdo. Don't talk to me. You know, so like, that was my first interaction with this. Yeah. And then I think the following Sunday, because she's like 5'11", she's tall. She's leaning up against the wall and like dark dress. And then she had like blue eyeliner or blue eyes, dark highlight. Sorry, eyes pop. Anyway, sorry. Okay. And I'm like, don't look. And she's like, "Hey." I'm like, "What? You talking to me?" You know? She's like, "Why don't you go to Bible study with us?" I'm like, "What do you mean, why? I'm 20. Oh, I was 21. I was 21 years old. Like, I don't need to go hang out with you young people." She's like, "Oh, you think we're the youth?" I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, No, we're the singles, dummy. She's 26, she's 24 with the kids, and I'm 21. I was like, "And I'm Luca."
Okay. And
then, so in the midst of this, me going to the older Bible study, there was this crazy guy who, like, I could tell was kind of washing off the old life, but, like, wanted to love the Lord, but, like, nuts.
Yeah.
You know, like, maybe he was a biker or a gang member or something, just weird, like, violent, kind of whatever, but, like, trying to tone it down. And I'm like, stay away from that guy. So this girl, her name's Megan, invites me to, you ever heard of, like, Mongolian Grill or Who Hut or whatever? Oh, it's amazing. Anyway, there's a Mongolian Grill, and she's like, "You should come to lunch with my family." I'm like, "I can do that." And it's the family, right? Because as Christians, we don't actually date like the world dates because the dating mentality says, oh, if it doesn't feel good, it's not for me, led by the flesh, right? So we should actually court, right, the godly plan that he made to create relationships to see if this person actually loves the Lord more than they love themselves, is willing to serve the Lord more than they serve themselves. All right, yeah, so that's a process of accountability because, the flesh. So I'm like, okay, with the family, I can do that. So I pull up in this parking lot, and who do I see? This crazy Mike guy. I'm like, what are you doing here? And he opens his door, tips his glasses down, and he goes, well, what are you doing here? I'm like, Megan invited me to lunch with the family. Do you know who that is? He's like, oh, my daughter? He's like, no.
There you go.
No, not this guy. Side note, we have fought 3 times since we've been married, but I am his favorite son-in-law. So,
Wow.
I told you he's crazy. He's crazy. I threw a rock at his head. He's backhanded. He's chased me across a yard, jumped a fence, and down a dirt road.
Wow.
And I didn't do anything that bad. Whatever. Anyway.
So you met your wife, Bible study, and she was able to keep up with you. And no, I guess you did some crazy stuff.
Well, so at the time, I was trying to put on that front.
Okay.
Right? And then I was honest. Like,
With her?
it kind of got to the point. Okay, so this is my wife, right? Like, I didn't marry a nice passive girl. I married a warrior. Like she got saved at 12 and then had this crazy teenage life, and did crazy things, in the metal band world, right? And they gave her life back to the Lord. And at that point, she had been just involved with a relationship with Jesus for a year straight, and nobody else and nothing else. And so I started, she worked at Blockbuster. Well, I started renting at Blockbuster, right? She worked at Perkins. I started eating at Perkins, because I'm a clown and I ain't got nothing else to do. So side note, because I had no one, I did have an issue with attachment, right? Like,
Okay.
There's love here. I want it. I've been needing it. So I overstepped my bounds for sure. So there's a point where we were at Perkins, and she was like, look, it's kind of getting to the point where I need to say this. We're going to stop here, or you're going to plan on marrying me.
Wow.
I'm like, okay, sure. And this was like in, I don't know, January of 2007. And, that was February 2007.
Can't forget that.
Yeah, it was February 13th, but it was at overnight, so it began on the 14th. And I guess that was when we were officially a couple. And because it was the 14th and I hadn't slept for 36 hours because I was hanging out with her and I had to go to work, I go back to her house and she totally got me a present and made me this chicken Kiev, which is not easy to make. And she's like, where's my present? I'm like, ta-da, oops.
I'm here.
She's like, oh, starting off bad already. I was like, my bad. And then her dad gave me that look, and I'm like, I'm sorry. I'll get her something. I promise. This guy. So his name is Mike. He's nuts. But love you, Dad, Pop. So my mom's birthday is April 30th. So that April 30th, I proposed to her. Basically, I took a ring, put it in a charcoal, wrapped it in foil, put it in like this dog toy, and then wrapped it in a balloon and said, my heart may be hard to get to, but it's like a diamond, trying to do something cool. And then I sprayed her with silly string because I'm me.
How did she like it?
Well, I was 4 hours late to pick her up because I passed out after work, so she was already not happy. Yeah, and then she's like, all right, since you're so late, I already ate, and then you're going to do your thing, I'm going to go.
Wow.
And we didn't actually have our first date until after I proposed to her. And I went to her parents' house where she was living, picked her up, went to Red Lobster. She ate something, made her feel bad. We went home, and I passed out on her parents' couch. That was our first date.
Interesting introduction.
Oh, yeah. And then our wedding, again, so I kind of messed up the whole dances thing with our wedding because I was grieving my mom. And I was like, let's not have the parent dance thing. And I don't know. So I would love to redo a wedding. But, man, her family stepped in, paid for a bunch of it. Her brother-in-law, who organized stuff for a hotel, did the whole thing, and it was kind of amazing. And I think it's the most boring part for weddings for other people is when we're up getting talked to by the preacher, which is cool because we did something that was unique, right? We each poured salt and said if we ever need to separate, we got to take our own salt out. So that was ceremonious. But her nephew was playing with his feet, making everyone laugh the whole time because he's like this little half white, half Indonesian kid. His dad's from Jakarta. So he was entertaining them while we were getting talked to. So it was fun, at least, and that was cool.
So I just want to go back.
Yeah.
When you were, having this hard time, you guys are separated for a time. And you mentioned how homeless people, they need someone that's in their face. Hey,
Pressure.
yes, that pressure. Something needs to change. How was that for you, having her?
So it wasn't perfect, right? Like there would be times where she took out her anger, frustration, anxiety, and all of that on me. And it was like, yo, you want to get married? You also want to find out how you're wrong every day, right? And be constantly confronted with your failures, mistakes, and shortcomings, because you will. And times that by 10, because she's disappointed that I'm supposed to be loving the, like she would constantly say, I miss the Christian Luca I married. I'm like, yeah, I miss him too. But the mistake I kept making is I'm not going to be back to the way I was, because when God allows you to be broken and he remakes you, you're going to look different. You're going to be different. Like there was a movie called Joshua, and he broke a bowl, and then when he put the pieces back together, he made like an angel out of the glass. Well, it's something, he took something broken and made something beautiful, but he made something different. So for me, it was hard because I'm constantly disappointing my family. Like, hey, you need to be the man you want your kids to be. I'm like, yeah, I know, but I don't have the strength to do it on my own. I don't think any of us do. Like, I had that misconception of, oh, Christ will never put more than you can handle. That's not a biblical statement. You constantly get more than you can handle, because it's through his glory that you get through anything. So I misunderstood that. So then I'm down on myself, thinking I'm not handling things that I should handle. Right? My bad. I know. I should have known better. So then I'm depressed. Oh, you wanted to bring up more bad stuff. That's okay. That's fine. Because in the midst of that, I would say 7 times in my life I planned to take my life, and 5 times I followed through with those attempts. And all 5 times, God miraculously stepped through. Like, look, I'm a veteran. I studied medicine. Like, I know how to end a human life. I couldn't even end my own. And I tried all the things. Like the time I tried to do the rope thing, I passed out and I woke up. And I don't know if you ever saw anyone try to hang themselves. Like they have a scar on their neck. Man, it wasn't even red. And God was like, you have a purpose. You have a life. You don't get to do that.
Wow.
I remember one time I was at work and I tried to take my life and it didn't work. And my very next customer, so I was repairing appliances in people's houses, was a pastor. And he's like, how you doing, man? And I was like, well, do I be honest? Like, yo, I just tried to take my life, but I didn't do it. That's how I'm doing.
Wow.
And I didn't know what to do, so I didn't say that, but I was thinking that, And then our pastor at the time found out, and then they intervened, and they all helped us and really stepped in. So thank you, Tim Bruno. I love you. I'll love you for the rest of my life.
Wow. So I know you have your ukulele. Did I say it right?
Yeah, I got to tune it, though.
Okay. We have your ukulele. We haven't talked about your experience about a professional Rubik player.
Oh, you want to get into that?
We're going to get there, but we need to wrap it up a little bit. Before we finish today, what is your final advice? You came to Corbin. We haven't talked about that yet. A lot of young adults are watching and listening to this.
Yeah, man.
So what is your advice? They might be struggling with, figuring out school and having all the responsibilities and figuring out life, because we deal with a lot of expectations. What's your advice to them?
Well, first of all, my perspective shifted when I experienced loss, right? So like my world was what I'm doing, what I'm studying, how I'm making money. And then I lose the 2 people that love me the most in life. Now all of a sudden, none of those things matter as much. And I guess my advice is leading into the thing that if you think that what you're doing or what you're saying or what you're dealing with is the most important thing in your life, maybe you're right. But I would say your relationship with Christ is most important. And whatever journey he takes you on, don't be discouraged if it doesn't look like what you think it should look like. Right? Like, oh, you didn't accomplish what you think you should accomplish. Well, how do you know? What if God led you to that place so you could fail, so that humility you gain from that failure draws you closer to him, and that was the purpose, right? So I'd advise you to have a perspective shift into realizing that your relationship with Christ is the most important, and worldly accomplishment may not look like what God's got for you and what he wants you to accomplish. So don't judge your self-worth accomplishments based on that. Like right now, while we're talking, I know I'm about to fail a class. The GI Bill pays for my study here, but they don't pay for D's. So I got to pay for that. So, oh, I'm struggling, I'm failing, I'm not doing good. Am I doing the wrong thing? No. No, no. Maybe this is an area where somebody else will bless me and draw them closer to the Lord. And my character will grow in humility and closer to the Lord. I'm constantly depending on Him. Like in the arena that I'm in now, I can do none of these things in my own strength. So it's kind of a blessing that God brought me here. Like, okay, dummy, you didn't give me glory, so now I'm giving you a place so you can give me glory. So yeah, give God the glory in every area of your life. And look, man, in the moments when you're desperate for Him, call out to the Lord. He's always listening. He looks forward to hearing your voice every day. He wants nothing more than to have a close relationship with you. So be honest with Him. You're not going to see Him with your physical eyes because He's a spirit. You're not going to hear Him with your physical ears because He's in spirit. And I know you probably heard He's always with you. He'll never forsake you. But my God, He will show up for you when you need Him to. Just ask. Just ask.
Wow. Luca, thank you so much for being here with us today. And it's been a pleasure. And we're looking for the next time talking with Luca.
Thank you so much, man. I love you. I appreciate you. Thank you guys for listening, watching, and be a part of this. May you be blessed and peace be with you. Aloha no malama pono.